are coming to you just outside the Visitor Center here in Parliament. Of course, it's always assumed that when the Finance Minister, Godongwana, presents the budget speech, it is a final product. It is not. In fact, there is a parliamentary process that has to be undertaken before the budget is approved by the National Assembly. Of course, again, he will be tabling two other money bills before the House, which include the Appropriations Bill as well as the Division of Revenue Bill. Of course, to explain to us the process of Parliament, of how this budget process is going to be undertaken. Joining me now is Dr. Dumisani Jantjies, the Executive Director of the Parliamentary Budget Office. Of course, your work primarily is to advise Parliament on how to interrogate the budget. We'll come to that in a moment. I want us to first explain the process. The Minister will table the budget speech today, and thereafter, what will the process that Parliament will have to undertake?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Yes, there is once the Minister tables, the Parliament process kickstarts of the processing the budget. And in terms of the Money Bills and Related Matters Act, there's a specific act that guides that. So the Minister will table 4 instruments, fiscal framework, which then it goes to Finance Committee to look at it and to consider it. As part of the process of considering those instruments, the public participation comes into place. Our role to advise on issues to consider, but also FFC as well as to take that into account. And once the committees have conducted a public hearing, listened to different stakeholders, the committees then table the report which says they agree or disagree or adopt or amend the budget itself, the instrument itself, and only then those instruments can be taken to the houses where it gets debated, where members of Parliament will have to agree. And that process takes place in both houses. So the fiscal framework first, division of revenue, the fiscal framework first has to be adopted. And that's where it shows the holistic picture of the budget, level of spending, level of revenue, level of debt, which again, if there would be taxes, will also be part of that debate as well. And that has to be approved within 16 days from today.
So, in terms of the numbers, we know that there is a required threshold that's needed. What's the threshold that's needed to pass these money bills?
I would have to be clear, but as far as I understand, it's just the majority of the members in the House need to approve the fiscal framework, division of revenue, and so on. But I think there are specific rules of Parliament in terms of how to do that. But the Act just specify it has to be adopted by the House in terms of majority of members within the House at that time.
You've obviously prepared a paper, an advisory paper to Parliament in terms of how to interrogate this budget when it is finally tabled. What would be the areas of focus, particularly around this whole debate around whether should the VAT be increased or not? What would be your advice to the members of Parliament?
Look, I think we took this in a different approach. We said this is a very crucial budget of the term, the first budget of the term. So our view is that it has to be looked at within that context to say what has been the commitments made by the President in the SONA and the medium-term development plans. What are some of the commitments? And very clear commitments. So we look at it to say, look, this is how will be the lens of Parliament look at the budget. In particular, the proposals, when they come in, they shouldn't be seen to be conflicting with realizing those priorities, dealing with cost of living, growth, and so on. So in our paper, what we do, we lay out different options to say, yes, we think there is a need for additional revenue perhaps, but there are options to get this revenue. We looked at, we simulated, sort of simulation to say how much would the 2% revenue VAT increase mean for revenue, but also more importantly, are there other areas where you could consider a similar amount of money? And
well, that's the point that I want us to take further. Would you support this consideration by the Minister that he says this is the option that was viable for him? Would there be no other revenue streams that he can tap into according to your research paper?
But remember, our role is not to...
Well, you'll be advising Parliament, yes, and Parliament will obviously be taking the cue and the advice that you'll give them.
Look, our advice We are saying there are other options. Showing clearly in our simulation there are other options that if Parliament doesn't want VAT or if South Africa doesn't want VAT, there are other options that we simulated shows they could, for example, in our simulation we do show that actually 2% of VAT will get to 48 billion or so. And we said, okay, what other measure? We said if you also impose 0.5% on wealth, net assets of the wealth, top quintile of the rich in South Africa, we can get the same amount of money which we want from there. But I guess the issue here is also understanding the importance of the tax system being more redistributive, because when imposed, people who can afford to pay for it, your system becomes more redistributive. But it's more complicated like that. But I think it was important to give Parliament those options to consider, and we're very confident that there could still be that allows more debate within Parliament in terms of other options. But it doesn't end there, Bulelani. It's important also to recognize that once that money is generated, what it will be used for. Because in our simulation, we do show that if you're going to recycle back that money to the economy, you're likely to see the positive net effect of whatever tax that we have put in place. If you're going to spend more money in infrastructure, spend more money in social support, spend money on education, healthcare, and so on, you can see a positive spin to it. So that also matters, not only the revenue side, but also what you use that money for. And we do show actually, if you recycle it back to the economy, you like to see more growth, more employment, and also you like to see the decline in the debt to GDP ratio, which is one of the key issues that proposed as part of the purpose of introducing the revenue mechanisms.
Lastly, before I let you go, if you had to put your bets, would you go for VAT or what other revenue generation schemes?
Well, I'm not betting anything, but I mean, look, I'm saying our tax system holistically has to be progressive. It shouldn't be borne a lot by the poor, but also tax is a social objective into it. So if we have to look into those two components I've mentioned now, definitely you probably want to look at other mechanisms, other tax proposals beyond just VAT. You can maybe get VAT, but other proposals we have to consider if we want to maintain the progressivity of the tax system in particular, but also deal with social aspect of it, which reduce inequalities and deal with some of the social impacts that VAT will likely have in our society.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Dumisani Jantjies. He is the Executive Director of the Parliamentary Budget Office. Of course, he's saying that this is not a straightforward issue. It's quite complicated. And of course, the minister will be stuck between a rock and a hard place. And I'm sure that he will not be liked by anybody because he will not be able to simply please all the people. On that note, we cross back to you in studio.
All right, Bulelani Philip, thanks very much indeed. Part of our team in Cape Town as we continue canvassing the many different issues that are likely to be raised in the lead up to this budget and certainly afterwards, if, of course, the budget is delivered at 2 o'clock.